Hi, I'm Tracy and my podcasts will be based on my autobiography, She Who Is She. I'll be covering different topics over several podcasts. These will all relate to my autobiography and covering issues of sexual abuse to domestic violence, as well as mental health to the autistic spectrum. Today's interview is with Malcolm Gilbert, who is the chairman of Family Matters. Malcolm, could you introduce yourself, your job title for Family Matters and what it is that you do?
Hello, Tracy. Yes, certainly, no problem at all. My name's Malcolm Gilbert. I'm the Operations Director of Family Matters. Family Matters is a Gravesend-based charity that provides therapy and support, and indeed a helpline as well, for victims of childhood sexual abuse and rape of any age and any gender. And we provide that service throughout Kent, part of South East London, and a little bit of Surrey at the moment, and we're hoping to expand still further in the future.
If people wanted to access these services, do they need to be living in that area, or would they be able to access it outside the area?
Yeah, I mean, if you like, the geographical restriction is as a result of the expanse of the service that we've managed to push out so far. If people wanted to travel into where is our operational area, we're more than happy to see them. There is no restriction, I have to say, on anyone accessing the service. About the only restriction we do have is that if someone is under a mental health team or something of that nature, we like to work with the mental health team to assist that individual, and that may mean a swapping of risk assessments. Now, of course, obviously some people may be too unwell to undertake therapy at that time, or beyond the possible, the possible skill level of our counsellors. But that's in a very, very rare circumstances. So it's an open to all service and available to anyone who is either in that area or would like to travel to that area.
I was saying about going outside the area because obviously some people may feel that their confidentiality may be broken.
Indeed.
Not through Family Matters, but that other people may see them going into that place.
That's right. That's right.
Can you tell me a bit more about the confidentiality with Family Matters?
As you are alluding to, confidentiality is a crucial aspect of the therapy that we provide. You must realise that victims of childhood sexual abuse and rape, but most especially childhood sexual abuse, they suffer a sort of shame that comes from the nature of the abuse that they've suffered. And without putting a finer point on it, it may have been a very close family member that had abused them, which, if you like, doubles that sense of shame. As a consequence of that, they are very, very reluctant to share that information, quite rightly, with anyone else, and they want to be keeping that as confidential as they possibly can. If you add to that, in some cases, if you like, a cultural overlay over the top of it, and I would point to the fact that Gravesend has a very high Sikh population, then of course there is another reason within their society, if they're accessing help from us, where they won't want that bleed, if I can call it that, to go out to the rest of the society, because of course everyone will know what they're coming for. If you come to the HQ, certainly then we have a slightly euphemistic placard on the wall. It doesn't say quite what it does on the tin, but it does infer what it does on the tin, if you like. However, because Family Matters is a community-based organisation, in as much that the reason we cover such a big operational area is because we have by-the-hour rented rooms in sort of high street-like type locations, the backs of churches, alternative therapy shops, you name it, we've used it or we are using it, all across Kent, South East London. Most of the people that are attending those venues, no one will know what they're coming for, because they're multi-use venues. They might be coming for Reiki healing or candles in the ear or something of that nature, which could offer you a certain amount of condemnation, but that's another thing altogether. We won't go there. But the truth of it is that it's anonymous to those attending, which is an important aspect of it, because we recognise the need for anonymity and confidentiality.
Yeah. Earlier on you mentioned the mental health team, and you like to work with them.
Yes.
How much would you disclose to them if what the person may be telling you, which they may feel that they don't want the mental health team to know?
Okay. Well, what goes on inside the therapy itself is confidential.
Yep.
There are only two, if you like, breaches of that. One is that all therapists have to be supervised by a senior therapist, and for that reason, and that's in order to make sure that they're giving the best service to that individual. Because sometimes it can be quite difficult to see the wood for the trees when you're in a room with someone and you're talking such intense feelings and emotions and what have you. Sometimes it takes a third person to look at that and have a cooler eye, if you like. And so there is some breach of confidentiality in that regard. Having said that, they don't use names, they tend to use numbers, so it's not identifiable material in that respect. The only other time that there's a breach of confidentiality, if there is some danger to that individual or to another person. So if there was someone was alluding to current sexual abuse elsewhere, then, or indeed that individual was suicidal, we might then call the doctor, or in the case of the sexual abuse somewhere else, we might encourage that client to report that themselves. But if they fail to do that, it may, in certain extreme circumstances, fall to us to do that. So that's the only time there's a breach. What goes on inside the session itself remains confidential. What we do when we're working with the mental health teams is we will share, progress information, if you like, because what we do also is we get the clients to report themselves how their progress is going.
Yeah. So
in fact, it's not our opinion or what we think, it's actually what the client has said. And we always check with them that that's okay, that we can share that.
Yeah.
And so what we're trying to do is promote an atmosphere of partnership working, but without necessarily divulging the really difficult stuff that they may be talking about, because we know that is very, very important, and they keep that secret.
And would that be used from the information that we provide, the client will provide on the questionnaire at the end of this?
Yeah, so at the end of it there'll be an assessment questionnaire. There's how was it for you? There was what was good, what was bad, what did you feel you achieved? Certain questions, and that's that sort of information that can be used. I mean, there is that information. Just incidentally, we sometimes get asked and are subpoenaed to provide that paperwork for court cases if there's a current court case, probably to do with a rape or indeed a sexual abuse case that's going to court. But as yet, we have not heard of that paperwork actually being used. It's part of the disclosure requirement for the defence and the prosecution. Though they take that paperwork, that nobody has yet, to my knowledge, ever used it as such. They just think it might be important, but when they read it, they realise it's of no impact whatsoever to the court case.
So any paperwork for a new client, the new client wouldn't have to worry about this paperwork going no further other than just...
No. We will draw from it statistical information which is not identifiable. So we're trying to look for trends, we're trying to look for improvements, we're trying to report our outcomes, because what we're trying to get from our clients is if they've had a positive experience and it's been good for them. Because basically if we can report that, and I'll just give you a for instance, we give out this paperwork to everybody. Not everybody returns it, but of all the participants that returned it over the last 4 or 5 years, which is over 2,000 people, 92% have said that those of them that were suffering from suicidal ideation, that their suicidal ideation has reduced. Now that's a really important statistic for us, and it helps us lever money out of people like the Big Lottery or Comic Relief or Children in Need, and of course ultimately I would hope we would be able to use it to secure funding of a more permanent nature from statutory sources, tenders and contracts and that sort of thing, because this is really important information. So we use that part of it definitely, but of course it's all anonymised. This is number crunching stuff.
Sort of going back a little bit, what can I just ask again? What age is that can use Family Matters?
Any age at all, absolutely any age. I mean, I think the youngest person we've seen has been 4. And I have to tell you, a couple of years ago, we had an 84-year-old lady come to us who just lost her husband. And she came to us, she'd been sexually abused by her father and had kept a lid on it. The only other person in the world that knew that was, in fact, her husband. Of course, when he died, she no longer felt she could keep the lid on it, if you like. And she came to counselling, and it had a very profound and definite effect on her, and helped her through the trauma of her, the loss of her husband as well. So having kept a lid on it for all those years, 84 years of age, she decided to tell somebody. So our therapist was very privileged to be the only other person that knew of her abuse. So just to give you an idea, complete age range, and of course gender as well. We
Yep.
will see men and boys, because, let's be fair, little boys get abused as well. Not quite in the same numbers as females, but still a considerable number of children. I mean, I think the most recent research on the prevalence of sexual abuse was done or it was published in, let me see, 2000? So it was 2010 in the Lancet, and it was by Professor Gilbert, no relation, I have to say, et al. So there was a number of others as well, but it was what they call a meta-study. So it was a study of studies, if you like, and they looked at all the prevalent studies that they had, and their best estimates were that between 5 to 10% of girls and 1 to 5% of boys suffer penetrative sexual abuse. Now, that's not the 1 in 4 number that you often hear bandied about, which is sexual abuse in a general way, which can, take some, if I can call it that, more minor episodes of sexual abuse to the more major ones. This is penetrative sexual abuse, and so it gives you an indicator of how many children are out there being abused. Now, a good few of those, or a very large number of those, will not have told, or have told someone who's not believed them, and they then have to deal with those. And of course, that's why we see a sizable number of our clients are adults dealing with
Prefer.
teams from GPs, from nurses, psychiatrists, other voluntary agencies, the police, teachers, schools, you name it, and we social services, we get referrals from all of those groups. However, we are an open access service, so it means that actually the individual can just as easily refer themselves as any of those statutory bodies, if you like. So we are open to referral from all quarters. The whole drive of what Family Matters is doing is to provide support and therapy and ease the pain and the discomfort and the mental pressure that victims of sexual abuse and rape suffer. So we have no debar as to who comes to us.
If somebody is referred or self-refer, how long usually do they have to wait before they would be seen?
Okay, well that can vary quite dramatically because it depends really on where they are, what availability they have. In other words, can they travel to a number of the various venues that are available, and of course then a combination of what therapists are available in that area. So it can, and certainly what I have to tell you is that we do prioritise children over adults as a general rule, and we will prioritise recent rape over historical events.
Right.
So if you like, you put those two in as well. But it can be almost immediate, in as much that you're in one day and out being referred to a counsellor within a week, or it can take, at its worst, about 12 to 14 weeks at the moment. We have had a much longer waiting list than that, but we've been very pleased to reduce it considerably, and we're very pleased to say it's about 12 to 14 weeks at the moment. And given that we see in excess of 800 people a year, that's not bad going, really, I have to say.
Quick, yeah. How many sessions would you usually look at, and the length of time per session?
Okay, well that's one of our important operating edicts, if you like. We try and operate our therapy within 12 sessions. Now, to some people that doesn't sound like very much at all, but there's a very, very strong reason for it. Especially when talking about victims of childhood sexual abuse, one of the things that happen is that their autonomy, their power, their self-determination has been taken from them by their victim, by being victimised. So what we're trying to do with our 12 sessions is say, well, therapy will facilitate you, will aid you. It will look at the resources that you have within you to try and come to terms with what has happened to you, but it's not the real world. The real world doesn't have a therapist in it everywhere you go, everything you do. And so what we're trying to do is create in these people independence rather than dependency. And there are there's an awful lot of folk who have been through the mental health systems, who the systems themselves have created a sort of dependency in them, which is very disturbing because they then don't want to break away from that. So what we're trying to say is that it does 12 sessions and it really isn't enough, then they can come back to us. And some people have come back to us many times over the years, and some people will get done, then they're fine, and then perhaps they have a bereavement or a divorce or some other major event in their lives, and they find they have to come back almost for a top-up of what they originally had. Now, we can't always promise they'll come back to the same therapist because they might have moved on, but the principles of what they'll be dealing with will be exactly the same.
Or would there have to be a certain period of time between your first 12 sessions before you could come back?
Yeah, what we always do, generally speaking, now sometimes you can get a sort of 6-week extension on your actual therapy, but what we would generally do if you're returning is put you to the back of the waiting list and let you come through again. So you might be up to 12 or 14 weeks before you come through. But again, that's to encourage that independence and rather than dependency. In other words, that therapist will not always be there. So you have to learn to, if you're going to readjust your life and look at the way that you think in a more what can I call it, a less dysfunctional way, so it's a less damaging way. If you're going to look at your therapy in a less damaging way to yourself, then that's something you have to learn to stand on 2 feet for, and that's what we really go for, and that's an important way that we operate, which is quite different than other organisations, it has to be said.
Does Family Matters provide a group counselling with a group of other women? Or
strangely enough, we've tried to do this on a number of occasions. We often get a lot of requests for it, but when we put out to people that we've got a group starting up, no one wants to come.
Right.
And so I think it's one of those things that people think they might like to do in theory, but when the reality lands on their doorstep in the form of a letter from Family Matters, they think, actually, I don't want to share all that stuff with other people. I just want it to be kept in a room with me and one other person who I trust. Because before you can talk about those really, really difficult issues that have arisen because, shall we say, your father has sexually abused you when you were younger, then you have to trust the person that you are talking to about that. Now, learning how to trust one person is one thing, but learning how to trust half a dozen people is quite an ask and quite a challenge. And we've quite recently tried to get that up and running, and it's kind of failed at the first hurdle again, So, yes, we've tried to provide it on a number of occasions, but not successfully. So I think it's a theoretical desire, I think, in most places.
With the recent media revelations, has it prompted an increase in people contacting you for the services?
Yes, it has. But first of all, I have to kind of confess that our helpline has not got many volunteers at the moment. It was just a blip in our recruitment, and consequently, the phone had a message system on it, but nothing else. But we did see an increase in phone calls last month. Since that has tapered off now, and we did see an increase in referrals for therapies. Now, nobody that I'm aware of was abused by the high-profile figure that we're hearing about in the news at the moment, but I think what had happened was it got people thinking about their own abuse, so it started to promote in their minds thoughts, where their buried thoughts had come to the surface again. They thought, I really need to do something about this. I remember one client of mine a long time ago telling me that keeping all those issues was like keeping all these pots boiling on a stove. Like I say, you had a stove full of pots all boiling, all with the lid on and all making a dreadful noise and stuff coming out the side and hiss and steam and everything else. And she'd spent her entire life, she described to me, sort of holding these pot lids down so that this stuff wouldn't come out, and then eventually decided that she needed to do something about it, and so she, with her therapist, opened each one of these pots lids and looked inside, look at that awful stuff that was making such a noise inside it. And a strange thing, as it does with pots, when you lift the lid, the whole thing went back down the pot, and actually it was quite a small thing at the bottom of the pot. It sounded and felt and in every way seemed to be bigger and more horrible than it actually was when they looked at it full on, straight on. And she did that with all of her pots and felt that she didn't need to keep the lids on them anymore. So that was an interesting way of looking at it. But certainly I think that has promoted a number of people to say, yes, I think I need help for my issues.
Yeah.
So we have seen it.
As well as clients getting in contact with Family Matters, how would people go about if they wanted to help with, like you said just now, you having lack of people sort of to take the calls?
And the helpline,
how would people go about volunteering for that?
Yeah, it's quite difficult for us because we get contacted by a lot of people who would like to help but have no particular skills that we can use. Now, we're very sensitive about the folk that we're seeing and the clientele that we think. We don't want them in a room with the wrong person. So even our helpliners tend to be, generally speaking, tend to be training as counsellors at the time that they come to us as helpliners. So we want to know that they have at least some awareness of what the effect of their words on those people, the idea of sensitivity, the concept of empathy, that sort of thing. We are listening. So it's actually quite limited what people can do to assist us. But we are always interested in, and people can contact us if they would like to do fundraising on our behalf or things of that nature, because we do have 1 or 2 fundraising events. We don't hold them regularly, but we do them from time to time. We had a 5K run not so long ago in Gravesend. But that sort of thing, we would welcome assistance from people on those occasions. So if they would like to contact admin@familymattersuk.org, then they could certainly offer their services to us, and we would make a note of that. And when we needed that service later, we might call on them or whatever. So that's the sort of thing we can do.
And just wanted to sort of make clear to listeners that would like to refer themselves or be referred. Family Matters, there is no cost, is there, for the...
Absolutely not. No, it's a free service at the point of delivery. There is no cost at all. We sometimes try and charge the statutory organisations, but not with any great success, I have to tell you. And certain of the parts of the service we provide are sort of semi-paid for by, for instance, Greenwich fund us, Bexley fund us, certain other borough councils fund us in part, at least. So at the point of delivery for the survivor, then there is no charge, and there never has been a charge, and people are quite at liberty to make donations if they would separately, or use their credit card on our donation sites and all the rest of it. But there is no charge, and that's an important thing for people to remember, because therapy can be damned expensive. There's no doubt about it. If you start to commit to it and you suddenly feel you need it, it could be an expensive business if you're paying for it.
So Malcolm, anybody who's listened to this and feels that they'd like to use Family Matters, who would they get in touch with now, and where would they go from now to start that ball rolling?
There are 3 ways of contacting us, and it would depend what it is you're actually after. So if you wanted advice and guidance, you can contact admin@familymattersuk.org. So if you wanted to go via the internet, and that can be also accessed through our website, which is www.familymattersuk, all one word, .org. So if you wanted to have a look at the website, and you can use the contact email system there. Alternatively, you could call the helpline, which is open some of the days during the week, but certainly you can leave a message and a contact number, and someone will try and get back to you fairly shortly, and that can be contacted on 01474 537 392, and the Gravesend exchange number, which is 01474. If you'd like to refer yourself for therapy, or just to explore what services we provide, then the administration unit would be more than happy to help you, and they can be contacted on 01474 53661. That's 01474 53661.
Malcolm, thank you very much.
Absolutely.